The Wisconsin Badgers are about to hire Shawn Eichorst as their new athletic director, and Scary Alvarez is here to tell you why he loves it. Scary Alvarez is back, and we got a big one today, kids. As all of you know who are listening to this, because no casuals listen to this podcast, the athletic director spot for the Badgers has been vacant now for several months after Chris McIntosh left to go to the Big Ten. And there's been a lot of speculation surrounding who might be in line for this job. A lot of names floating in and out of there. I'm not going to go into the people who didn't get it. There were some good names on there, though, for sure. But I'm going to go into the gentleman who did get it, Shawn Eichorst, who is currently the Deputy Athletic Director and Chief Operating Officer for Texas football, former Nebraska A.D., former Miami A.D., Wisconsin native. And I'm going to tell you why I think this is a sneaky home run hire for the Badgers. Throw a Scary like and a subscription if you haven't already. That always helps you to see this instead of the PJ Fleck Dancing Bear Hour. So, all y'all have been following this athletic director story, and I know what an important hire this is for the Badgers. I think they're always important. So I don't, obviously when Barry was hired as athletic director back in 2005, and then McIntosh succeeded Barry, you're not going to have an athletic director hire Johnson and not have it be a seismic event. And to increase the drama a little bit for this one, 2026 is a significantly more complicated and complex environment for an athletic director to navigate than it was when Barry was hired or even when McIntosh was hired. The skills necessary to thrive in the NIL transfer portal environment, I don't want to say they're completely different than they were previously for reasons I'm going to get into. There are certain skills and traits that I think transcend any era that are important. But having a savvy corporate type who understands money, finances, deal making, things like that, has never been more important than it is right now. And my guess is that is part of the reason why Ikehorse was selected. And I'm going to kind of go into my sort of overarching reasons why I like the Ikehorse hire. It's not official. It's going to happen, kids. So let's go in a little bit of information onto what Ikehorse has done in the past. He's a Lone Rock, Wisconsin native who attended Wisconsin Whitewater. You probably were first exposed to him when he was a deputy AD under Barry Alvarez between 2006 and 2011 in the Wisconsin Athletic Department, some very successful years for the football program, as you'll remember. He then left that job to become the athletics director at Miami. He had a pretty short tenure there, not because of any success. He hired a very successful basketball coach there, but Nebraska pried him away from the Hurricanes, and he was the athletic director at Nebraska for 5 years. Full disclosure, I think it's fair to say that he had mixed results there. Some Nebraska fans, in fact, probably remember him as someone who set that program in a negative direction. Here's the context. And this is an interesting insight into the mind of this individual. But like McIntosh, who preceded him at Wisconsin, there was a decision in the football department that defined his tenure. And what Ikehorse did at Nebraska was he took frankly, there's a lot of revisionist history here, but a much maligned football coach in Bo Pelini. You say what you will about whether he's successful or not. All the dude did was win 9 games every year, which sounds awfully good right now for Wisconsin. But he fired him because that wasn't up to what was perceived at that time as the Nebraska standard, and replaced him with Mike Riley, who was a fairly successful, well-regarded football coach who absolutely face-planted there in Lincoln for whatever reason. And the reality is that Ikehorst went down with that ship. When Riley was unsuccessful, Eichorst was tied to him, and that was that. Eichorst, after leaving Nebraska in 2018, was hired by the University of Texas, where he has been ever since, in a behind-the-scenes but ever evolving and strengthening role. And he is now the deputy athletic director and chief operating officer for the football program there. Texas is, I think it's fair to say, an elite, or at least borderline elite football program right now. Their success has certainly been better than it had been prior to him heading over there. But the bottom line and top level thing to take from Ikehorse tenure at Texas is it is a huge athletic department in terms of money. That football program is like some nations as far as the money it has flowing into it. And he has been presiding over that NIL program during the formative years. And Texas is now widely known as, if not the number one NIL program in college football, certainly one of the top 2 or 3. So that is important context for the decision makers on the Wisconsin committee that made this hire. But let's kind of hit the high points here. Wisconsin native, check. Experience, deep experience, 5 years in the Wisconsin athletic department, being a huge player under Barry Alvarez with the football program between 2006 and 2011. Check. Big-time athletic director experience at 2 major sports-centric universities in the University of Miami and Nebraska. Check. Yes, as I just went into, the tenure at Nebraska did not end the way we hoped it would. And one of the criticisms there, besides the fact that his hire didn't work out in the football program, was that he was, I'm quoting here, paraphrasing, that he was a little bit aloof and a little bit too corporate and not touchy-feely and not huggy Cornhusker guy. And while that may have arguably been one of the valid reasons for not wanting him there in 2017, given the job responsibilities of an athletic director at the University of Wisconsin in 2026 versus what those would have been 10 years ago, I'm not entirely certain that what once was a criticism and once was seen as a negative is not now a positive and a calling card. Don't get me wrong. I don't have any impression that Ikehorse is going to come in and be tyrannical and cold and terrible. I think he probably learned some lessons from his Nebraska experience. But those very things that made him not as popular with the good old-fashioned Midwestern Nebraska folks, being aloof and corporate, let me tell you something. This Wisconsin athletic director has to be corporate. It has to be a huge fundraiser. It has to understand the ins and outs of the finances and make those difficult decisions sometimes that you have to make that don't necessarily always feel great. So I'll get back to this in a moment, but one of the main criticisms of Eichorst at Nebraska could be a boon to his tenure at Wisconsin. But as we're checking off the things here, though, so he has experience. And then finally, as I just alluded to, maybe even the biggest check mark, he has had a stable 8-year tenure in Austin, Texas, basically as one of the main caretakers of the up-and-coming resurgent Longhorns football program in the NIL era that has it. It's the envy of almost every team, including the SEC, as far as the money it has and how it lands recruits and how it navigates the transfer portal and how it navigates NIL. Look, it's not the same as hiring the Longhorns athletic director. Chris Del Conte was never going to come to Madison, guys. But someone who works under Chris Del Conte and is navigating these difficult waters in the NIL department, albeit at a very rich school, I think that's an incredible check mark, an incredible thing to have for a Wisconsin athletic director. And as long as the realities of what Wisconsin has were discussed in detail, which I have no doubt they were in this hiring process, it would be malpractice had it not been. And understanding that Wisconsin is not going to have the same resources, obviously, that the Texas Longhorns have, unless we have some rich uncle oil money people that I'm unaware of at Wisconsin. I think Ikehorse understands how to navigate fundraising, how to work corporations and big donors. He gets it. He's worked with some of the toughest ones, and obviously a lot of Texas's donors are alumni based. But let's be clear here: that environment is working against schools like Texas A&M and TCU and Texas Tech, where there is so much money floating around. It's kooky, crazy money that Midwestern medium tier NIL schools like Wisconsin, or maybe we're better than the medium tier now, have never had to navigate. So there's a skill set there that can hopefully translate. There is no doubt in my mind, and this will all come out, I'm sure, via legitimate journalists, how this decision was made, but you are not going to have an offer extended to Ikehorst without the blessing of Wisconsin football, Wisconsin athletics' biggest donors. There's no way that's going to happen. It's just no possible way that you are going to get this, you're going to get signed off, and you're going to make an offer if Ted Kellner has not approved it. So the way I am reading this is, besides liking the cut of this guy's jib and his experience and his Wisconsin ties and his experience with the Wisconsin Athletic Department and his experience at two different places as athletic director, there is an understanding here before ink is put to paper between Ikehorst and the biggest donors in the Wisconsin football program and Wisconsin athletics, that there is a wink and a nudge that he is coming in here knowing that Wisconsin is going to need to be competitive, continue to be competitive, and become more competitive in the NIL environment. There's no way that didn't happen. So on top of all of these individual boxes that I think Ikehorst checks, this to me is validation that Wisconsin and its corporate donors and its individual donors in the NIL era, in the transfer portal era, are on board with continuing to grow what Wisconsin has, refine what it has under Ikehorst's watch. What that is going to look like, that ain't the theme of this podcast. What I'm doing here is giving you vibes on the Ikehorst hire. I like the Ikehorst hire. Is it perfect? No. As I noted, Wisconsin isn't hiring Chris Del Conte from Texas. They're not hiring a currently 2026 successful athletic director. You can make the argument that someone like the Boise State guy, who I know was in the discussion, or the gentlewoman from the University of Arizona by way of Missouri, who might have a little more tangible boots on the ground, leading the department kind of things, well, I could have lived with too. But as I said at the outset, I'm not getting into who we didn't hire. I'm getting into who we are going to hire. And calling it a home run, I think it could arguably be a home run. I call this a triple with room for growth, with room for an inside the park home run. But at the bottom line of all of this, the University of Wisconsin, I think, in Ikehorst, has someone who fits the bill of what a successful 2026 big-time Power 4 athletic director would look like. So my early returns are, I really like this hire. It's not official, but I think the Wisconsin committee, who has done with Ballard and on down, seems to have done their homework and done a good job here. I do not think this is going to be universally praised, given some of the issues that Ikehorst had at Nebraska. But I think for reasons I've already gone into, I think those are data points, but I like the hire, guys. I really, really do. And I hope that he is obviously very successful. Much, much more to come on this. This is kind of a Scary Alvarez breaking news. But I'd like to hear what you think about Ikehorst in the comments. Y'all have very good opinions typically on this, and I'd like to hear what you think. Anyway, Scary Alvarez is out.